Pastor Karan was a name that echoed across cities. His church, the Sanctuary of Light, stood tall like a palace, filled every Sunday with thousands of worshippers. People traveled from far and wide just to hear him preach. His words were powerful, his voice calm and convincing. To many, he was not just a pastor, he was a symbol of hope. Luxury followed him everywhere. Expensive cars lined his compound, his house looked like a mansion fit for royalty, and his lifestyle spoke of a man deeply blessed. Whenever people asked about his wealth, he would smile and say, "God rewards faithfulness." And his members believed him. Among them was a young woman named Ada. She had been attending the church for 2 years. She admired Pastor Karan deeply, but lately, something felt off. It started with small things. Members who were very active in church suddenly stopped coming. When asked, the church leaders would say they had traveled or moved away. But Ada noticed a pattern. These people were often those who had recently shared testimonies of breakthrough or had gotten close to the pastor. One evening, Ada stayed behind after choir practice. She had forgotten her phone inside the church office. As she quietly walked back, she heard voices coming from a restricted room. No member was allowed to enter. Curiosity pulled her closer. The door wasn't fully shut. Inside, she saw Pastor Karan not in his usual white suit, but dressed in something darker, his tone no longer gentle. Around him were a few trusted leaders, their faces were serious. On a table were items she couldn't fully understand, strange symbols, objects that didn't belong in any place of worship she knew. Her heart began to race. "Another one will be ready by next week," one of the men said. Pastor Karan nodded slowly. "Good. Everything must continue. We cannot lose what we've built." Ada froze. In that moment, everything clicked: the disappearances, the secrecy, the sudden wealth. Fear gripped her. She stepped back carefully, making sure not to make a sound. Her hands trembled as she left the building, her mind spinning. The man she had trusted, the man thousands looked up to, was hiding something far darker than anyone could imagine. That night, Ada didn't sleep. She knew one thing for certain: the truth was dangerous, so she stopped attending the church because she didn't want to be a victim. Some government officials were aware that something wasn't right. Reports had surfaced: missing members, strange late-night gatherings, unexplained movements within the church. But every time questions got too close, they disappeared just as quickly. Money changed hands. Files went missing. Silence was maintained. For Pastor Karan, it was simple: as long as he paid the right people, nothing would ever happen. But not everyone could be bought. Aliyah was a journalist, known not for fame but for her stubborn sense of justice. She had heard whispers, first from a grieving mother whose son vanished after becoming deeply involved in the church, then from a former worker who fled in fear. At first, the stories sounded like rumors. But Aliyah didn't ignore patterns. She began to investigate quietly. She traced names, followed timelines, and uncovered a disturbing link between several missing persons and Pastor Karan's inner circle. The deeper she dug, the more resistance she faced. Anonymous threats, strange calls at night. Even subtle warnings from people within the system: drop this story. You don't understand who you're dealing with. But Aliyah refused to stop. One evening, she met Ada, the same young woman who had once admired Pastor Karan but now lived in fear after what she had witnessed. Ada's testimony gave Aliyah something she had been missing, a direct connection. Now, the truth had a voice. Aliyah knew this was bigger than just one church. It was a system: power, money, influence, all protecting one man. So she made a decision. If the system wouldn't act quietly, she would make the truth impossible to ignore. She prepared a full expose: documents, testimonies, timelines, everything she had gathered. Instead of sending it to just one authority, she released it across multiple platforms at once. By morning, the story had spread beyond control. Public outrage erupted. People demanded answers. The same officials who once stayed silent could no longer hide behind closed doors. For the first time since he arrived in Nigeria, Pastor Karan felt something unfamiliar. Pressure. Real pressure. And as the walls began to close in, one truth became clear. The place he believed he could never be caught was the very place where his downfall had begun. People were shocked, angry, betrayed. Crowds gathered outside the Sanctuary of Light, demanding answers. Social media was flooded with questions. This time, silence was no longer an option. Pastor Karan, who once stood confidently before thousands, now found himself face to face with something he had always believed he could avoid. He was arrested. The news spread even faster than the expose itself. For many, it felt unreal. The man they had trusted, followed, and defended was now at the center of a national scandal. But Aliyah wasn't done. As investigators began digging into Pastor Karan's background, something even darker surfaced. His identity, carefully constructed over the years, started to crack. He wasn't just a foreign preacher who came to build a church. He was a fugitive. Records from abroad revealed that Pastor Karan had once been imprisoned in another country for a serious crime, the murder of a business associate. Before completing his sentence, he had managed to escape under unclear circumstances and disappeared. For years, he had been on the run. Nigeria wasn't just a mission field for him, it was a hiding place. The discovery sent shockwaves through the investigation. What had seemed like a single case of deception now became an international matter. Aliyah stood silently as the news broke, watching from her small office. There was no celebration on her face, only a quiet sense of resolve. Because she knew the truth. This wasn't just about exposing one man. It was about proving that no matter how powerful, how connected, or how hidden someone might be, truth, when pushed far enough, has a way of rising. And this time, it did. Pastor Karan's arrest was only the beginning. Within days, the case expanded beyond Nigeria. International authorities became involved, linking his identity to old criminal records that had long gone cold. What once seemed like rumors were now backed by undeniable evidence. The trial was set in Abuja, where the nation watched closely. Courtrooms were filled. Journalists lined the entrances. Victims' families sat quietly, carrying years of unanswered questions. Among them was the mother who had first spoken to Aliyah, her eyes filled with both pain and hope. For the first time, Pastor Karan no longer looked powerful. Gone were the expensive suit and commanding voice. Standing in the dock, he was just a man facing the weight of everything he had tried to hide. The prosecution laid out the case piece by piece: testimonies from former members, evidence gathered by Aliyah, and international records confirming his past crime and prison escape. Each detail chipped away at the image he had built. His defense tried to argue, to deny, to create doubt. But the truth was too strong. When the final judgment came, the courtroom fell completely silent. Pastor Karan was found guilty on multiple counts. The court ruled that he would face the full consequences of his actions under the law, while also opening the door for international cooperation regarding his past crimes abroad. A wave of emotion passed through the room. Some people cried. Others simply sat still, as if finally able to breathe after years of fear and confusion. Outside, the news spread quickly. Across cities like Ibadan and Lagos, people reflected on what had happened, how easily trust had been manipulated, and how long the truth had been hidden. For the victims' families, justice did not erase the past, but it gave them something they had been denied for so long. Aliyah, however, stayed away from the spotlight. She returned to her quiet walk, continuing to tell stories that others were afraid to pursue. One evening, as she packed her notes, a young reporter asked her, "Weren't you scared?" Aliyah paused for a moment before answering, "Of course I was. But fear doesn't mean you stop, it just means you understand what's at stake."
The story of Pastor Karan would be remembered for years not just as a tale of deception, but as a reminder that truth may be delayed. Welcome to Moonlight Folktales. If you love stories, please subscribe and leave a comment for more.